The goddess once held her newborn son by the heel and lowered him into a black river that could wash the mortality out of a body. She meant to make him a god. But the hand that held him covered one small patch of skin the water never touched, a heel, no wider than a coin. That child would grow into the deadliest warrior the world had ever seen, a man who could not be wounded, could not be stopped, could not be killed by any blade in any army. And he would die anyway, from a single arrow, in the one place his mother's fingers had shielded. He was given a choice no one else was offered: a long life, quiet and forgotten, or a brief one whose name would burn forever. So why, 3,000 years later, do we still speak of Achilles? His father was Peleus, a mortal king. His mother was Thetis, a goddess of the sea, one of the immortal Nereids, so beautiful that Zeus himself had desired her, until a prophecy warned that her son would grow greater than his father. So the gods married her to a mortal instead, to keep that greatness safely below Olympus. Their son was Achilles, and he is the beating heart of the oldest story in Western literature, Homer's Iliad, composed nearly 3,000 years ago. We think of it as the story of the Trojan War. It is not. Its very first word is rage, the Rage of Achilles. This is the story of a man who was almost a god and could never outrun the one human thing left in him. From the moment he was born, his mother tried to cheat his mortality. In the most famous version, told long after Homer by the Roman poet Styx, Thetis carried the infant to the underworld and dipped him into the river Styx, whose black waters could make mortal flesh invulnerable. An older tradition is stranger still, that she tried to burn the mortality out of him in fire each night, until his father Peleus caught her at it and cried out, and she fled back to the sea, the work unfinished. She held him by one heel and lowered the rest of him beneath the surface. Every part the black water touched turned proof against spear and sword and arrow. But the heel she gripped stayed dry, a single unguarded point on an otherwise unbreakable body. It is worth pausing here, because Homer himself never mentions this. In the Iliad, Achilles is simply the greatest of mortal fighters, not a magically sealed one. The invulnerable skin and the fatal heel come from later poets, but the image was too perfect to forget. A hero whose one weakness was the very place his mother had tried hardest to protect him. Thetis knew something else, too. She had heard the prophecy: if her son went to war at Troy, he would win eternal glory, and he would never come home. A mother who has been told exactly how her child will die does not sit still. So when the call to arms began to spread across Greece, Thetis hid him. She sent the young Achilles to the island of Skyros, to the court of King Lycomedes, and dressed him as a girl among the king's own daughters. There, disguised and unknown, he was meant to sit out the war and live. He was a boy still, the fastest and strongest of the household, hiding his strength beneath a woman's robes, while across the sea kings gathered 1,000 ships. For a while, the trick worked. The greatest warrior of the age was folded away out of sight, and fate was kept waiting at the door. But the Greeks had their own prophecy. Troy could not fall without Achilles, so they sent for him. And when Skyros claimed no such warrior lived there, they sent the cleverest man in Greece to find out. Odysseus came to the court disguised as a traveling merchant and spread out gifts before the king's daughters: jewelry, fine cloth, perfume. And among them, almost carelessly, he laid a shield and a spear. As the girls admired the trinkets, Odysseus gave a secret signal, and a war horn sounded outside, as though the palace were under attack. The daughters fled, all but one, who seized the spear and the shield by instinct, ready to fight. The disguise fell away. Achilles stood revealed, weapons in hand, and there was no hiding any longer. He knew the prophecy. He knew that to sail for Troy was to choose death. He went anyway. For 9 long years the Greeks laid siege to Troy, and for 9 years Achilles was their sharpest blade. No wall, no champion, no army could stand against him. But the Iliad does not begin with his triumphs. It begins with an insult. The Greek commander, Agamemnon, was forced to give up a captive woman he had claimed as a prize. That woman was Chryseis, the daughter of a priest of Apollo. And when Agamemnon had refused her father's ransom, the god sent a plague hissing through the Greek camp, cutting men down for 9 days until Agamemnon was forced to let her go. Robbed of his own prize and humiliated, he seized Achilles instead, a young woman named Briseis. To Achilles, it was more than a theft. It was contempt in front of the whole army from a lesser man who commanded only because of his crown. And so Achilles did the one thing that could break the Greek war effort. He withdrew. He laid down his spear, walked back to his ships, and asked his goddess mother to beg Zeus himself to let the Greeks be slaughtered, so that they would learn, in blood, exactly what his absence was worth. Zeus granted it. Without Achilles, the Greek line buckled. The Trojans, led by their noble prince Hector, drove the invaders back across the plain, all the way to their beached ships, and began to set them alight. And watching this disaster was the one person Achilles loved above all others, Patroclus, his closest companion since childhood, dearer to him than any prize or any king. Patroclus could not bear to watch the Greeks die while Achilles sulked, so he begged for Achilles' own armor, and Achilles, still too proud to fight himself, let him take it. Wearing the armor of the greatest warrior alive, Patroclus stormed onto the field, and the Trojans fled in terror, believing Achilles had returned. He drove them back to the walls of Troy, and there, beneath those walls, the god Apollo struck him from behind. His borrowed armor fell loose, and Hector ran him through with a spear. Patroclus died in the dust, wearing another man's glory. When the news reached Achilles, the pride that had held him back for so long shattered into something far more terrible. He fell to the ground and poured ash over his head, and his cry of grief was so raw that his mother heard it from the depths of the sea. His rage at Agamemnon was nothing beside this. Now he wanted only one thing: Hector, dead. Thetis brought him a new suit of armor, forged by the smith god Hephaestus himself, a shield covered in the whole living world, and Achilles went to war as no man had gone before. He drove the entire Trojan army back inside their gates in a single afternoon, until only Hector remained outside, and the two greatest warriors of the age faced each other beneath the walls of Troy. Hector ran. Achilles chased him 3 times around the city, then he turned and killed him. And in his grief and fury, he did a shameful thing. He lashed Hector's body to his chariot and dragged it around the walls day after day before the eyes of the dead man's family. The Iliad ends not with a battle, but with a father. One night, the old king of Troy, Priam, Hector's father, did the unthinkable. Alone, unarmed, he crossed the enemy lines, walked into the tent of the man who had killed his son, knelt, and kissed the hands that had slaughtered his children. He begged for Hector's body so that he might bury him. And Achilles, the man of rage, wept. He wept for Priam, and for his own father far away, and for Patroclus, and for all the men that war grinds into dust. He gave the body back. It is the most human moment in the whole poem, and it is where Homer chose to end. But the story did not end there. Soon after, in the fighting that followed, Paris, the Trojan prince whose theft had begun the war, drew his bow. The arrow, guided in the later tradition by the god Apollo, found the one place on Achilles' body that a mother's love had left unguarded, his heel, and the greatest warrior who ever lived fell in the dust he had filled with the bodies of kings. He could have stayed on Skyros. He could have gone home, married, grown old, and faded into a name no one remembered. He was offered that life plainly, and he turned away from it. He chose the short road, and the burning name, and the arrow in the heel was the price written into that choice from the very beginning. The one soft spot on an unbreakable body was never really the flaw. The flaw and the glory was the choice itself. To trade a long, quiet life for a story that would outlast every king who ever mocked him. 3,000 years later, we are still telling it. The kings are dust. The name still burns.